I'm Harper. And I just want to say one thing before we begin. Backhand index pointing right if you love cold, satisfying, real-life revenge stories, especially the kind that don't involve yelling or throwing punches, but instead outsmarting the system. Make sure to subscribe to Reddit Revenge Diaries, give this video a thumbs up, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Because trust me, this one is personal. And it's about my mom. This isn't a story about me getting revenge. No. This is a story about a woman who just buried her husband. And got a phone call asking for $5. Let me take you back to 2018. It was a nightmare. My dad had just passed away, suddenly, unexpectedly, only 2 days after making a payment on the car he had just bought for my mom. It was a brand new car. A gift. Something he wanted her to have because her old one was breaking down. It wasn't even 2 months old. But here's the twist. The loan for the car was under his name, not hers. Why? Because he financed it through his credit union at work, and my mom wasn't eligible to join, she didn't work there. So he handled the paperwork. He made the down payment. He made the first payment. Then came the second. 2 days before he died, he wrote the second check. But, and I swear, this detail feels almost too cruel, he accidentally wrote it for $5 less than the full amount. $5. The day after my dad died, the literal day after, the credit union called. Not to offer condolences. Not to ask about funeral arrangements. Not even to ask if we were okay. No. They called to ask for the missing $5. I was the one who picked up the phone. I told them, gently, that he had just passed the day before. I was calm. Kind. I even said I would make sure my mom sent the $5 right away. They said, okay. I hung up. I cried. I went back to helping my mom figure out how to plan a funeral she wasn't prepared for. But the next day, they called again. And this time, they weren't asking for $5. They were asking for the entire car back. Yeah. You heard that right. One day after losing her husband, my mother was being told that because she wasn't on the loan, even though her name was on the title, she wasn't allowed to keep the car. No exceptions. No sympathy. No help. Just give us the car. Now. She tried to reason with them. She explained everything. She asked if she could transfer the loan to her name, they said no. She asked if she could join the credit union, they said no, she wasn't an employee where my dad had worked. She was stuck. Carless. Grieving. Alone. And now being hounded every single day by a cold, robotic system that cared more about a payment than a person. They called every day that week. Demanding the car. Refusing to help. Denying her even the down payment they had already taken, which, by the way, was substantial. They wanted everything, the car and the money, and didn't care that she had just lost her partner of decades. But you don't mess with my mom. She's a quiet force of nature. Not the screaming type. Not the meltdown type. She's the smile while I burn your house down with paperwork and pettiness type. And that's exactly what she did. No yelling. No confrontation. No drama. Just revenge, with style. She got online. She searched. She made a few calls. And she found a dealership 6 hours away with the exact same make, model, year, and color of the car she had just lost. She drove there. Alone. Bought the exact same car, in her name this time, and sealed the deal. Then she drove that brand new, legally hers, zero credit union attached car home. But she didn't go straight home. She stopped at that dealership lot again. You know which one. She parked the old car, the one the credit union was harassing her about, right in the back of the lot. Left the keys in the glove box. Walked away. And then, She threw the spare keys in a random trash can and never looked back. The next day, the credit union called again. Same message. We need the car returned immediately. Her response. It's in the lot at dealership name. Go get it. Good luck. They threatened her again. Said she had to return it properly. She said, and I quote, F***you. Go get it yourself. Then she hung up. And blocked their number. And that was the last they ever heard from her. To this day, my mom drives that car, the real one, the one she bought for herself, in her name, with her own paperwork. And every time she starts it up, she smirks. Because they thought they could bully a widow over $5. But instead, they ended up with an abandoned vehicle, no refund, no leverage, and no apology. This wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It wasn't aggressive. It was revenge done right. And that's why she's my hero. Subscribe for more stories like this, because sometimes the best revenge is silent. When you're in shock, everything moves slowly. Breathing. Thinking. Blinking. Even anger. But not my mom. After that final call, after she told the credit union to come get the damn car themselves and drop the location pin 6 hours away, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She brewed tea. Sat in silence. And then, with all the grief still coiled around her like barbed wire, she opened her laptop. She was done being polite. The next morning, while most people were still sending sympathy cards, my mom was already 20 tabs deep into policy manuals, loan documents, and archived PDFs from the credit union's website. She wasn't just grieving, she was researching. What she found was quietly infuriating. In the fine print, buried under legalese and jargon, there were clauses that specifically excluded surviving spouses from accessing accounts, loans, or property, even when they had been jointly used. Unless you were a registered member, you were legally nobody. And yet, that registration was impossible to get unless you worked at a very specific place. A workplace my mom obviously didn't belong to. It wasn't just bureaucratic oversight. It was engineered invisibility. My dad had made the down payment. He had made the first 2 payments. The credit union had accepted his money, his paperwork, his service. But when he died, everything vanished. The deal, the agreement, the human decency. And they wanted the car, even after they took everything else. But the more she read, the more she realized. It wasn't just her. This wasn't a one-time cruelty. It was a policy. A system. So she dug deeper. And that's when things got strange. 3 days after sending her formal complaint to the State Credit Union Regulatory Board, my mom got her first anonymous message. A plain Gmail address. No name. The subject line. You're not alone. Inside was just one paragraph. I worked at, redacted, credit union for 11 years. I saw this happen more than once. Surviving spouses being denied access. Loans being revoked. Cars being seized. All under the excuse of policy. It's real. And it's worse than you think. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she started compiling a folder. She called it Widow Protocol. Inside it, she began to collect emails, voicemails, copies of letters from the credit union, screenshots of internal policy PDFs she saved before they were mysteriously removed from the website. A spreadsheet labeled Other Cases. The spreadsheet had a chilling purpose. It was for every widow she could find who had been treated the same way. At first, it was hard to locate them. People don't exactly post about being exploited after their husband dies. But then, quietly, women started finding her. They came from Facebook grief groups, a Reddit post, a church bulletin board. One said she was told she owed $6,000 to cover her husband's loan even though he'd paid insurance on it for years. Another said her husband had a joint savings account, but the moment he died, she was locked out of it. And one woman, barely 30, said she was evicted from the home she and her husband had just bought because the mortgage lender refused to acknowledge her as co-owner. All of them shared the same pattern, grief weaponized against them. So my mom did something unthinkable. She created a Gmail group chat. Just a few women at first. She didn't call it anything dramatic, just, "See you widows support." But what started as support turned into something sharper. It became a movement. They exchanged tips. What to say when collectors called. What words to use in complaints to state regulators. How to file public records requests without triggering alerts. They were building a fortress, not just for protection, but for retaliation. A week later, one of the members of the group, a paralegal named Denise, offered to help them formalize their reports. She gave them free access to document templates, helped them phrase things in ways that wouldn't get dismissed, and even coached them through call recordings. That same week, a local business journalist, a guy in his 20s, fresh out of college and bored with ribbon-cutting stories, stumbled across one of their posts. He reached out to my mom. She didn't give him much. Just dates. Figures. Documents. Screenshots. A timeline. He called her ma'am and apologized for asking too many questions. When he published the article a week later, it wasn't a local piece anymore. It was titled, "Paper Widows, How Credit Unions Exploit the Grieving with Legal Loopholes." And it went viral. Suddenly, the phone stopped ringing. No more threats. No more letters. No more, "Where's the car?" voicemails. Instead, the credit union issued a statement on their website, "We take these concerns seriously and are reviewing all past cases." They shut down their site for maintenance. 3 board members resigned. The State Financial Oversight Committee launched an investigation. They had poked a widow. And she'd built an army. But still, my mom never once raised her voice. She never posted a rage-filled status. She never doxed anyone or said a cruel word. She just watched the house of cards collapse, one receipt at a time. To this day, she has a folder on her computer. It's updated weekly. It's called Justice. Inside are thank you letters from women across the country, women she's never met, who say she gave them a voice, a spine, and most importantly, a plan. And the car. The one she bought in her name. Still in the driveway. Still spotless. Still running like a dream. But now, it's more than just a car. It's a monument. A symbol of what happens when you underestimate a woman with grief in her heart, silence on her lips, and a to-do list on her desk. If you ever underestimate a grieving woman with a highlighter and a printer, I suggest you don't. Because at this point, my mother wasn't just grieving. She was filing. Cataloging. Sorting. Analyzing. Reading over contracts like a forensics expert dissecting crime scene photos. The car was just the first domino, and now that it had toppled, she could see how deep the line stretched. Her folder of injustice had grown so large that she had to upgrade to an external drive. Labeled neatly in Sharpie. Phase 2. Because this wasn't about the credit union anymore. She had their attention. But now, she wanted answers. And the next ones? Were at my father's former job. You see, after the article went viral and the credit union began its frantic damage control, something strange happened. Another anonymous envelope appeared in our mailbox. Inside, a pay stub from my dad's final month at work, and an unsigned note. You should look into the bereavement fund. Ask about policy C-41. There was no return address. Just the document and the cryptic message. We'd never heard of any bereavement fund. But when my mother began calling around, no one wanted to talk. At first, it was confusion. Then awkward pauses. Then, silence. Every HR rep she spoke to transferred her. Every supervisor passed the buck. Until finally, someone slipped. A woman, clearly younger, nervous, whispered, "We're not supposed to give that info to non-employees," before hanging up in a panic. Which confirmed what my mom suspected. There was a fund. And they were hiding it. Digging into my dad's employment handbook, yes, she kept everything, she found a clause mentioning a confidential discretionary account created by the board, meant to help families of deceased employees with transitions, funeral costs, and emergencies. Buried in legalese, barely half a paragraph. And suddenly everything clicked. The credit union wasn't the only institution screwing widows. His employer had pocketed a fund that was meant for us. So she reached out to the CU Widows group again. She asked, "Anyone else have husbands who worked for, company name?" 3 women replied. Each one had lost their husbands over the last 10 years. Each one said they never received any transition assistance, no check, no outreach, not even a condolence email from the company. One said she was told by a receptionist, "Sorry, he wasn't high-ranking enough." Another had been ghosted by HR completely. That was it. That was all my mom needed. She printed everything. Compiled it all into a legal-style binder. Then, and I'll never forget this, she walked straight into that company's downtown headquarters. Blouse. Slacks. Gray heels. Silent fury in her eyes. She didn't ask for a meeting. She walked up to the front desk and said, "I'm here about the money you owe my dead husband." The receptionist froze. People stared. Security was called. But she stood her ground. No screaming. No crying. Just power. Eventually, they brought down a manager. Not a VP. Not an executive. Just a low-level admin manager who clearly had no clue what was about to hit him. My mom handed him the binder. Said, "If I don't get a call in 48 hours with a formal explanation, this entire folder is going to every news outlet that ran the last story. And this time, I'll name names." Then she turned. Walked out. And never looked back. 2 days later. A courier dropped off a check. $28,742. No note. No apology. Just silence. A few hours after that, she got a call from a new widow, someone who had just lost her husband a week ago. She said the company had suddenly reached out to offer her support. Out of the blue. No explanation. Just sudden generosity. That's how you know they were scared. Not of my mom. But of the truth she carried. Meanwhile, the CU Widows group had ballooned to over 70 women. One of them, a quiet, soft-spoken lady in Nebraska, turned out to be a retired CPA. She started combing through the documents my mom collected and noticed inconsistencies. Red flags. Double-charged loan interest. Penalty fees that didn't match public disclosures. Interest rates mysteriously higher for widows than for other members. They weren't just mean. They were stealing. And now, there was evidence. The widows didn't go to the police. They went to a journalist. The same one who wrote the first article. He was stunned. "This is a financial class action case waiting to happen," he said. And just like that, the story became bigger than grief. It became fraud. The second article went global. It made the homepage of major news sites. TV stations picked it up. One morning, we turned on the news and there it was. Credit union corruption scandal, how grieving widows were financially abused across state lines. There were photos. Documents. And a quote from an anonymous source that read, "We thought these women would disappear quietly. We were wrong." The credit union's building was vandalized. They shut down branch locations. The CEO gave a shaky press conference and retired for health reasons. Meanwhile, Harper's mom, my mom, didn't flinch. She didn't want their money anymore. She wanted justice. And she was getting it. That's when the state attorney general got involved. Then the Federal Credit Union Administration. And soon after, lawsuits. Not just one, but multiple. Spanning 4 states. All tied to the same shady practices. At one point, my mom was asked if she'd be willing to testify. She said, "Only if the lights are on. I want them to see my face." But here's the craziest part. She never wanted to be a hero. She just wanted her damn car. That was it. A car her husband had bought her. And instead, they awakened the sharpest, calmest, most dangerous version of her. A woman with grief in her heart and truth in her hands. By the time this phase of the storm ended, the credit union was under federal review. My dad's employer had paid settlements to 5 different widows. And a new nonprofit had been formed, by the widows, called Clear Ledger. Guess who's the founder? Yeah. My mom. And her mission statement is just 6 words. No widow fights alone ever again. They thought she'd stop. They thought a check would shut her up. That the news would move on. That the lawsuits would tangle themselves into bureaucracy and die off like a bad headline on a slow news day. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Because my mom wasn't done. She hadn't even peaked. At this point, she had become something else, not just a grieving widow seeking justice, but a symbol. A lightning rod. Quiet, composed, but sharper than any attorney they'd ever faced. And now, she was ready to tear apart the curtain. It started with a spreadsheet. See, one of the other widows, let's call her June, had quietly been tracking something for months, interest rates. She'd noticed something odd. 2 women with identical loan balances. One had a 2.9% interest rate. The other, 6.7%. The only difference? The woman with the higher rate had lost her husband 2 weeks prior and had refinanced the loan under pressure from a rep. That rep had assured her she was getting a discount for being a long-time client. Spoiler, it was a lie. That loan had been altered behind the scenes. The terms changed, the paperwork backdated. And June found 8 other cases that matched the same pattern. They were altering loans after a spouse died, making the surviving partner pay more under the guise of standard policy updates. That was criminal. Harper's mom, of course, got the file immediately. She printed every line. Color-coded it. Cross-checked it with archived policy brochures she'd downloaded before the credit union revamped their site. She matched dates, transaction codes, and call transcripts. It was airtight. So she walked it straight to the state consumer protection office. And then she sat back and waited. But she didn't just wait. She prepared. Because she knew the people responsible weren't just some grumpy loan officers in cheap suits. No, this kind of corruption came from the top. She started mapping out the entire credit union's leadership structure. The CEO. The CFO. Board members. Corporate lawyers. She built a literal org chart in her living room. Pinned to the wall like a crime documentary. Red string, yellow highlighters, and sticky notes. The woman had created her own war room. Then came the domino that changed everything. One morning, a small manila envelope arrived in the mail. Inside, a USB drive. And a handwritten note. You don't know me. But I know them. This file proves what you've suspected all along. Good luck. That night, we watched the videos together. It was recorded Zoom calls. Board meetings. Internal discussions. Leaked from someone inside. On one video, the CFO literally said, "If the husband dies, the account is ours unless the wife's on file. That's the policy. Don't explain it, just enforce it. We don't want lawsuits, but honestly, most of them don't fight. Another exec chuckled and replied. Yeah, by the time they realize, we've already repossessed half their stuff. They laughed. They laughed. That was the moment something changed in my mother's face. She didn't get angrier. She didn't cry. She just went still. She copied the files, backed them up in 3 places, and then reached out to a contact from one of the news outlets that had already covered the first 2 stories. The journalist met her in a parking lot. No cameras. No mics. Just a legal envelope with a flash drive inside. And the truth. 3 weeks later, the world exploded. The headline? Exposed, credit union executives caught mocking grieving widows on secret recordings. It trended #1 on Twitter. Cable news picked it up. Federal agents opened a full investigation. Multiple states launched independent inquiries. The credit union's stock plummeted. And the people on those calls? Fired. Some under criminal review. One even fled the state. Through it all, Harper's mom refused interviews. She didn't do podcasts. No Instagram Live. No TikTok testimonials. She told the reporter, quietly. This isn't about fame. It's about never letting this happen again. But still, she became famous. To the widows. She was a legend. To the system. A threat. And to the rest of the world. A reminder that justice doesn't always come from courts or politicians. Sometimes it comes from a woman in her 50s with a printer, a grieving heart, and an iron will. By now, the lawsuits had grown into a class action beast. National financial watchdogs had gotten involved. 2 senators requested hearings. And Harper's mom? She helped write the proposed Widowed Borrower Protection Act that was introduced to Congress. Yeah. She went from fighting over a $5 mistake, to reshaping national financial legislation. Let that sink in. So what's the end of this story? Did she take them all down? Did she walk off into the sunset? Kind of. But not really. Because my mom still wakes up every morning and checks the group chat. She still helps widows navigate paperwork. She still flags predatory contracts and files complaints in states she's never even been to. And every once in a while, a new story lands in her inbox. A new injustice. A new fight. She never wanted to be a crusader. She just wanted a car. But they made her a warrior. By the time my mom reached this point, she was no longer just the grieving widow trying to hold on to a car. She had transformed into a powerful force, a symbol of resilience and justice in a system that often preys on the vulnerable and the grieving. Her fight, which began with a simple $5 payment mistake and a ruthless credit union demanding the return of a car, had exploded into a national movement that was shaking the very foundations of financial institutions and government policy. The Widowed Borrower Protection Act, which she had a hand in drafting and championing, was no longer just a bill on paper. It had passed critical committee votes and was rapidly gaining bipartisan support in Congress. News outlets, podcasts, and social media campaigns spotlighted the stories of widows trapped in predatory loans, manipulated by callous institutions who counted on their confusion and grief. Financial organizations scrambled to revise policies and train staff to comply with new standards. Widows everywhere were empowered by my mom's courage, seeing in her the strength to stand up and demand fairness. My mom's journey had taken her from a quiet, private battle to the spotlight of national leadership. She was invited to testify before congressional committees. Before a room full of lawmakers, she spoke with calm authority and heartfelt conviction, laying bare the cold, calculated exploitation she had uncovered. Her testimony was not just about policy, it was about people. About widows losing homes, cars, and dignity. About grief used as leverage to bleed families dry. Her words resonated. They moved people. They made lawmakers understand the human cost behind the numbers. After her testimony, she was approached by advocacy groups, legal teams, and fellow widows who wanted to join forces. She founded an